Thanks for joining us today. I'm delighted to say that with me is Ali Oliver, Chief Executive of the Youth Sport Trust. Welcome back to Stoke Mandeville Stadium, the birthplace of the Paralympics, Ali.
Absolutely, it's brilliant to be here again, thank you.
So, it's very, very different. It's been several years since you last spoke at this event. Since then, the COVID pandemic has affected almost every element of our lives. What was the impact on the Youth Sport Trust?
Well, I think like most organisations, the first impact was not a great one, was goodness me, the world stopped. We obviously do the majority of our work in and through schools and education, and when they closed and sent children home, it was a real sense of what do we do. But then things picked up, because I think then we got lean, we had to furlough a lot of staff, but it forced us to be much more innovative, again, as many organisations, and we started to be liberated and think differently. And at the same time, quite wonderfully, there was more of a demand for the services of the charity. Everyone was worried about children not moving enough, being locked in home, and those children without access to outdoor space. So in a funny way, not that I would ever want it to be repeated, it has brought into very sharp focus the health and well-being of young people and the role of physical activity in their lives. So we find ourselves now today, I think, a bit liberated. As I said, we've done things a little bit differently. We've learned a bit more about how to use technology for positive outcomes. And there is a growing demand for the sort of services that we feel for years we've been championing and saying are important to young people, but that's never really risen up the agenda to the level it is now.
No, that's good to hear. There's a sense of organisational resilience that you're talking about there. Homeschooling was necessary for everyone, even me, but what lasting impact, if any, do you think there will be on children, perhaps also school leaders, and how's the Youth Sport Trust involved in addressing some of these?
Thanks. Well, I think there's absolutely no doubt and growing evidence base for the consequences of lockdown on young people. Although they, thankfully, weren't in the firing line of the virus, there were some young people, sadly, who were affected by it. But the consequences for young people were much more about their lives being put on hold, impact of being indoors and in front of screens for even more hours. So we know fitness levels have gone down. We know there is still mental health issues that are residual from this, and indeed they were present before, but they've sort of been accelerated in many ways. And of course, they've missed out on loads of things, and schools clearly and understandably are obsessed with the learning loss and how we catch up that missed learning. But at the same time, we know that children don't learn very well if they aren't feeling great and aren't feeling comfortable in school, and we see the role of play in sport and physical education absolutely now at the centre of education to help young people find their way back to their personal best, and then in the classroom be able to perform better. And I think what we're seeing is a split of schools at the moment, some really enlightened schools who get that and are investing a lot of time in the whole child and the whole young person, but equally a lot of schools who I do understand, who feel the huge pressures from parents and others on academic catch-up, who actually are minimising the time for play and for physical education, and that's where we have to focus our greatest efforts, really, as a charity that's committed to every child enjoying the benefits that come from playing sport. We have to work with those who haven't seen the light, or who just can't work out how to do it, can't work out how to fit it in with all the other priorities.
Yeah. And I think one of the things that I spotted during the recovery phase that Sport England launched its strategy around uniting the movement. And the core of the strategy is about tackling stubborn inequalities and levelling up opportunities. So very much touching on what you're saying there. And one of their big issues was creating more positive experiences for young people and suggesting changes are needed within the current system. So, there's one line in there that stood out for me, which was, while the current system works for many children, it doesn't work for everyone. And the Youth Sport Trust has banged this drum for a very long time, many, many, many years. And how close are we to getting to a level playing field, and what are the key areas that your organisation is developing to try and make things more equitable?
Well, I think we are a long way from a level playing field, and I think COVID has exacerbated the inequality in the system. Those young people who come from the most disadvantaged backgrounds suffered the most, all the consequences of the pandemic. So as children return to schools and are back in schools now, the gaps between, if you like, those more advantaged or affluent young people and those suffering disadvantage are much more apparent. And I think the challenge is, how do we recognise and harness the inherent value of being active for every child and keep focusing on every child needing at least 60 active minutes a day, as the Chief Medical Officer says. But now be really discerning as educators and deal with what's in front of our face and recognise those who need it most, and whether the role of play, sport, physical education is in rebuilding fitness, rebuilding physical confidence, rebuilding a sense of self-worth and self-value, or just rebuilding friendships and human connections. And if we can take that child-centred approach and deal with what's in front of our face, that's when we can be really creative with the subject and identify the activity areas that we teach in the curriculum, the pedagogy that we use, the feedback that we give in the lessons. We just need to think about that and get away from the predetermined sort of habits that some of us have got into around, okay, it's week 3 of a unit of work where we're doing gymnastics or whatever, and this is what we focus on. It's a great moment to help PE teachers get back to teaching children first and then using their subject to deliver those outcomes. So we're working really hard on that. And one thing I want to kind of just mention here is, we know that young people have missed out a lot on feedback in the last 18 months. Not many people are talking about that, but they haven't had their books handed back by their teachers right in front of them as frequently. They haven't been in assemblies, they haven't been in classrooms where they've been having that feedback. So we've accelerated the development of a very simple award for PE, which recognises how children are developing their life skills through PE. And it's very simple, but it's a way of both giving value to the subject now, positioning it against some of the losses children have experienced, but making them feel great that they're making progress, finding their way back, and having those moments of self-pride again in themselves.
Yeah, brilliant. I mean, it's coming back. I sense it my own too, that they're bouncing back well from that, and it's just make sure every child has that opportunity. I mean, that's what we're collectively working on. So if I take the discussion to a more local level now, for the past 5 years or so, active partnerships have become far more strategic, far more evidence-led, experts locally, what we might describe as going granular, often with a very targeted approach. And from this, I sense the relationship with the Youth Sport Trust and active partnerships will need to be more cooperative, even more cooperative, going forward to aggregate our resources and involving the SGOs into certain areas and certain schools. I mean, that's my view. Do you share that view?
Absolutely. I mean, I think what the last 18 months has necessitated but facilitated is a much more collaborative approach, actually, as we've all just kind of been wrestling with the dramatic changes for young people and in our communities. We've kind of pulled our resources, I think, much more effectively across the landscape, and the Sport England strategy around uniting the movement is absolutely capturing that spirit that we're all wrestling with the same issues, and working together is definitely the way to go. We can be more as a whole than we can as the sum of our parts. And I think your reflection on the Youth Sport Trust Active Partnerships relationships is spot on. You know, we're a national charity, we're a UK charity, and we have regional staff, but they're regional, they're not local staff. And we've always, if you like, seen our local reach being through our networks, whether that be the fortunate position we have in supporting the school games organisers, or whether it's those school sport partnerships that still exist, or whether it's our own network of member schools. That's where our work happens locally. But our schools need to be helped to be anchor institutions in their community, and that's where we really need the help of active partnerships. You are working with all those other anchor institutions in a local community, and how can we work with you so sport can pioneer the way that schools find their home in their community, but also that the links between school and community become seamless for young people, and more of them make the transition into community sport, which is where they're going to spend their lifelong participation. It's not going to be in schools. So I do absolutely reflect kind of your position, Mark, on that we are getting better at working together. You know, it's brilliant that you've invited me to speak at your conference. I know our regional officers work really closely with your team here, but how we can both work together to help schools embed themselves in their communities and benefit from everything that's going on in the community, but also be of benefit to the community.
No, that's brilliant. I mean, we're on the same page, and they often have been. 2022 is an exciting year in the UK as Birmingham hosts the Commonwealth Games. A special year. I think we've got some special projects planned. What's the Youth Sport Trust going to do in that context?
Yeah, well, 2022 is a big year. I mean, as you say, the Commonwealth Games are coming home to Birmingham, and it's brilliant that Sport England have identified the school games as being one of the legacy activities for the school games. But it's the 10th anniversary of London hosting the Olympic and Paralympic Games with that amazing strapline, Inspire a Generation. So now is a moment for us to really look back, celebrate how it did inspire a generation and the great wins that have been achieved. You know, we're here at Stoke Mandeville, and one of the great things that's been achieved in the last 10 years in school sport is much greater inclusion of children with special educational needs and disabilities. But also, it's the year that we'll launch our new strategy. So we're really, I think, fortunate that the way things have fallen is in May we'll launch our new strategy, and we've got the next 6 months to continue to reflect on the consequences of COVID, continue to project forward. We've just published a report called the Class of 2035, giving us a horizon to aim for. So it's going to be a bit of an exciting year, but lots of need for change, just to kind of only bring back now the things that were working really well and we still need, and leave some old things behind and do some dramatically different things that our young people need.
Well, that's brilliant and very exciting to hear. And I think just taking a step back into the past, it was 26 years since the Youth Sport Trust was formed, and I had my first job with the then Sports Council doing the research of the TOPS programmes, Top Play, Top Sport and Top
Brilliant.
Club. I mean, gosh, here we are 25 years later, and so much success, so many things have been achieved by the organisation in that time. The anniversary, the 25th anniversary was last year under the shadow of COVID. As you said, there's a lot of exciting things to look forward to, so your strategy's coming out. Are there any sneak previews, or what does the future hold?
Well, the future will be in part a continuation of the things we've been doing in our last strategy. Actually, we haven't, as many organisations don't, actually kind of get to where we wanted to get to, and COVID obviously had an impact on that. But we've been on this journey of trying to help transform physical education so it is more meaningful and relevant and inclusive to all young people, and we're not there yet, so that will be continued. We've had in our current strategy this kind of empowering a generation of activists. If anything, the last couple of years have given young people even more of an appetite to have their voice in the future and what this world will look like for them and their children. So we want to continue on that one, but there's no doubt the biggest characteristic of our next strategy will be addressing the gaps created by inequality in all sorts of ways, whether it's the wider determinants of health, whether it be the gaps in education achievement, or whether it just be the gaps in access, and how we give access, equal access to every young person to a quality PE and sport experience, so that there is no sense going forward that there's a certain part of society who doesn't play sport because it's just been out of their reach. That's what we've got to really focus our minds on.
Okay, that's brilliant. I can't wait. Looking forward to that. And let's catch up again in another 25 years' time. Thanks as ever for coming and joining us today. So it's really brilliant to see you. Thanks very much.
Lovely to be here. Thank you so much. Thank you.